Photography Daily is a Loading Zone production.
I'm local today to where I live. As I said to you a couple of weeks ago, I'm sort of over the next few weeks staying reasonably local while I prepare for the retreat that's coming up. Not so far away now, is it? So I've found myself. I'm next to the canal, which you know is one of my favourite places to walk, and I seem to be amongst the swamp. Look at this. If this isn't the finest example of algae across a pond, you'll never believe me. This looks like pea soup. It really does. So I'll get a photograph of this, and when I return it colour-wise to you, I'll be very careful when I process it to make sure it retains the colour that, so far that I can remember, with my eye anyway. So I've got my trusty X100 with me today. And although actually I could have done with a wide angle today really and brought my X Pro 1 out, but here we go, shutter speed 100th, ISO 160th. It's another one of those sort of dank overcast days, but this I should be able to get the colour beautifully for you. There we go, F4. Anyway, that wasn't really the planned start I had today. I had a question for you. Well, I still have a question for you. Do you have slightly older kids? I only ask because our Jack, our eldest, in his early teens now, asked just the other day, "Dad, are you happy with what you do for a living?" Which opened up this long debate about turning a dime for the boss or turning a dime for your happiness or something along those lines, until he got bored and went back to playing FIFA 22 on the Xbox. So, well, listen, you're a friend of mine. We're a micro community, you and I, as we walk together here with our cameras and share some quite personal stuff at times. So I got to thinking more about happiness. And there's a sort of theme running through today's show. Well, certainly with my guest anyway, about that. And as an extension of happiness, safety, because I wear sort of two hats. I split my life into two, really. One I'm on the radio, and podcasting counts really under the same breath here. I feel like I'm in my safe place. I always did. I always do. There's not a moment where it seems like work. I mean, the writing and the recording and the researching and the photo walking and the editing, all the ings. I love all the ings. Sometimes it's more challenging, but even during those moments, well, you know, I still feel in a very safe place. I know it. And then photography. Well, that's the second part of this equation, for which, and I told you I'd be honest with you, I'm not always sure that I'm in my safest place. Even after, in commercial terms anyway, even after 17 years and 900 weddings, there's still a part of me that has what you rightly call imposter syndrome. That thing we talk about so often, but what I do love are all the moments where you and honestly, I believe I feel this, where you can feel your heart slow as you witness through your lens something very personal, something very emotional, very special. It's all the alls at this point, isn't it? I love all the alls. They are my safe moments. So I suppose on that basis, you could say that I'm very, very lucky. I mean, I've got a rubbish pension. The company benefits are about as unspectacular as I could possibly muster. I'll probably have the same car for a decade now. And what's wrong with that car? Don't get feisty now. I can't see I'll ever be able to retire like most of our friends, mainly now thanks to the C word. But do you know, I wouldn't swap this for all the grey pinstripe suits in Savile Row. And this week's guest, I think, has been in his happy and safe place for his entire life. Photographically, I believe that. I go as far to say his sheer passion, which can be an overused word, particularly in social media, can't it, is, well, you can't say infectious these days without shifting uncomfortably, but I'd like to use that word. It really is. I find myself glued to his every word whenever I hear him talk. we were supposed to go on a Photowalk together this time last week, but things in this modern world conspired against us, and so we jumped on Zoom instead. And we're going to meet up in the coming, well, it'll probably be months, maybe weeks, but more likely months. So I'm delighted to talk today with a true landscape legend, Charlie Waite. And I typed into Google how long Charlie has been making his beautiful pictures around the world, actually, and I think this sums up his attitude to making photographs and also his feelings probably about life. In a career spanning nearly 50 years, the reason for Charlie Waite's success is clear. He has unapologetically stayed faithful to beauty and tirelessly committed to photography as an art medium.
Today on the Photowalk.
So all I can do is stand there and gasp, because I think when we do suddenly pause for a moment, and what do we mean by contemplative and meditative? When we actually pause and think, we are part of this absolutely extraordinary thing called human existence.
Stories of life told by photographers, and today more of your stories about what photography means to you, why you make pictures, what you make them about, how your camera helps you to see the world. It's a very different type of photography podcast, made out in the wilds, on a walk, me with my camera, you with yours, earbuds in, and a mailbag of letters. Plus, of course, my guest, Charlie Waite, today. And some former guests with snippets of inspiration, including Thomas Heaton and Henrik Saxgren. I'll tell you about today's letter topics in a moment. First, though, lend me a moment so I can share something about those who support this photo walk. My friends at mpb.com are very precious to this show. They are the #1 platform in the UK, the US and Europe when it comes to buying and trading and selling quality used kit online. They help photographers like you, like me, to tell our unique stories by giving us a safe place to buy and trade and sell the kits that we need. And in doing so, well, we're all part of this sustainable circular economy. A picture, a moment can change the way we feel. It can change how we view the world. It can even provoke and change history. So, sell the kit you're not using. Trade it for the kit that you need to create. Buy used, spend less, and get more. Go to mpb.com. Also, a big hearty thank you to our patrons, of whom I'll talk more about later. So today on the show, your letters about imposter syndrome. I feel I need some sort of echo chamber to underline the gravity of that subject now. How this pandemic has made you get out and make pictures, perhaps in a way you might not have if the world had kept turning in its more regular pattern. I have the best homemade, or maybe home thought, when it comes to method, in which to stop thousands of dollars, euros and pounds worth of camera kit being blown over when it's atop a tripod. More of your 2022 photo plans and why being local with your picture making could become your photographic superpower. A famous photographer who'd make a great football manager. An idea for those moments where you can't think of what to shoot and you need a challenge. A checklist too about this podcast from Belgium land, and some new thoughts about introversion. Turns out you may not be introverted at all. That's all on the show today. Shall we walk then? Coffee and Garibaldi's packed? Check. Boots on and laced? Check. Warm walking pants? Check. Spare batteries? Check. Fillmore cards? Check. Earbuds in? Check. Lens caps off? Let's walk. I'm so chuffed to be speaking to Charlie Waite today, and it really doesn't matter what genre you shoot. His sheer devotion to the craft of making pictures really comes across, I think, in our conversation. Plus, he's answering some of the questions that you've posed by email and in the Facebook group. And one of those questions is the so-called impossible question, according to, I think one of the greatest interviewers of our time, Michael Parkinson. Right, did somebody mention imposter syndrome at the start of the show? Yes, you did, Neil. 2 messages on that to start this week. First up, Jerry Tillingworth. Hello, Neil. Imposter syndrome being one of the facets of being creative. I wonder if it just builds as you grow mentally and even confidently, which seems, I know, counterintuitive. I've been photographing 25 years, having picked up the camera to originally take my mind off the stresses of policing. At first I shared my prints with anybody willing to humour me. But as the years have passed, I show my photos less and less, really. Like the pastime has become intensely private to me. The truth is that with time, my standards have become higher, personally. And of course, thanks to the internet, there's more photography to devour than ever before, much of it exceptional. So imposter syndrome is a chain I think we place around our own necks when really we should celebrate more the wide-eyed naivety of when we started. Keep up the good work. Enjoy hearing the conversations, and I'll sign off with a quote you may like. The French photographer Marc Ribot said, taking pictures is savouring life intensely, every 100th of a second. Ooh, and you're right, I do like that. Something else I like is, if I were in America now, I'd be thinking I'm sort of in that part of, there was a part of America close to Daytona where I went, where I felt like we were in the sort of the Alligator Flats. Is that what it's called, Alligator Flats? I've probably got that wrong. Gator country for sure. And where I'm walking today, there's the water one side, and there's this algae, this intense algae that I've told you about as well. And then the other side, it just, this sort of marshland. You'd be saying to me, Neil, don't be stepping off the beaten track. But there is a swan. I told you about the algae a moment ago. There is a swan right in the middle of this beautiful green algae. And I want to approach it really carefully because I just know he or she is going to turn away. Oh, and sure enough they are. I need to grab this really quick. And it's just this intense green with the white there. I've got a picture. It's a grab shot, I appreciate. Shutter speed 100th, f4. Mr. Swan, or are you Mrs. Swan? That was a cracking, that would have been a cracking picture. It's the one that got away. I was reading about Marc Ribot. If you're not aware of Marc, M-A-R-C, and his story, until 1951 he worked as an engineer, but he took a week-long picture-taking vacation, and you never know where your picture-taking vacations are going to lead you. And in Marc's case, it was the start of a new life, because it inspired him to become a photographer. He moved to Paris. He met Henri Cartier-Bresson, not a bad character to meet, Robert Capa, David Seymour, the founders, of course, of Magnum Photos. And by 1953, he was a full member of the organisation. His ability to capture fleeting moments in life through powerful compositions was already apparent, and this skill was to serve him well for decades to come. See, there's a man who practically bathed in being wonderfully wide-eyed. So much so he joined one of the, if not the greatest agency on the planet, for his genre of documentary photography. I don't think he passed away so long back, actually. 2016, I did obviously hear some research on him, but I think it was 2016. Anyway, here's another one on imposter syndrome. This one's from Helen Fennell. Hello, Neil. Hope all is well. Things here, Potter on, as always. I went on a photo walk yesterday, photos attached. Yes, they were amazing pictures. They are amazing pictures. And of course, I'll put those on the show page today. Make sure you go see the show page. All the links and pictures that we reference will be on there. I caught up on the last couple of episodes of PD as I walked. The conversation about imposter syndrome piqued my interest, as this is something that comes up in my day job quite a lot. I'm an engineer. Oh, magical connection to Marc Ribot there. And I manage a team of engineers, from those just starting their careers to those who, shall we say, have a few more grey hairs. I often get asked by newly qualified engineers when the imposter syndrome goes away. You see, we tend to think that imposter syndrome is only for those in the creative industry, but not at all. And I think that's the point we made last week, wasn't it? They always look horrified when I respond that it doesn't. It's always there. It never diminishes. The repercussions of getting something wrong with the work that we do are often significant in terms of safety impacts. It's important as professionals that we constantly worry about where the limits of our knowledge are so that we don't make poor decisions. More than anything, though, that nagging doubt means we do care about what we're doing. And if we care, we strive to become better engineers. I always tell my team that if you stop caring about it, then it's time to stop. Applying that same idea to photography, a little bit of imposter syndrome may be uncomfortable, but it shows how passionate we are about this wonderful art form. And maybe it also helps improve us too. Sending best wishes from a cold and foggy Hampshire. And the pictures, as I say, will be on the show page. Love them. Absolutely glorious pictures. Thank you, Helen, so much for them. And I'll link to more of Helen's work as well. And, Helen's one of our patrons, for whom I am very, very grateful. A couple of weeks back, I did a digital drop-in with as many patrons as I could talk with in one day. And I've been doing a few extra calls since then as well. And I collated some thoughts, really. I asked some questions, some random questions, and collated their thoughts back. And I thought you might like to hear some of these wise words. Matthew Haddo here shares what photography means to him. And Matthew is very lucky to live on the coast, which is, it's a great gift, isn't it, for any photographer?
Escapism takes me away from the everyday. Not that every day is a bad thing. I've got a good life, good job, good family, but it just takes me away into a different plane. I'd say it's slightly spiritual, really. I find it, I quite like nature and the elements and listening to the sea or what's around, birds, or just the peacefulness of it sometimes. And I just sink into that, really. And sometimes if it's a sunrise or a sunset, the colours that are produced just can be mesmerising. But equally on a stormy day, you have the violence there as well, which just stands out, and that's absolutely breathtaking, and that just completely draws me. That's what it gives me, is just escapism, sense of achievement as well. I think when I come away and I've looked at my picture and it's like, I did all right there. That looks good, It gives me confidence as well, It's all those things encompassed. It's just beginning to fall in love with it more and more. The more and more I do, it's taken over a little bit,
Matthew Haddo, one of our patrons, sharing his thoughts about photography, and you'll be hearing more from our patrons. If you'd like to join our patrons, you can, of course. On the web page, there is a link to be a supporter and a subscriber to the patron shows. We do some extra shows called The More Show on a Saturday. We'll talk more about that a little bit later on. I've got a feeling I'm about to be rained on. That feeling is in the air. We'll be stopping for a coffee break under a tree, Garibaldi's and Flask. Actually, for those coming on the retreat, I have a special limited... I can't tell you that bit. No, that's a surprise. Don't spoil the surprise, Neil. Okay, shush. Secret safe with me. There's loads of trees down along this path. This has become like one of those corporate obstacle courses. How are we going to get over this one? Just over here. There we go. Right, let's do a triptych of emails, starting with Kelly Mitchell in America land. These pictures you sent in, Kelly, were originally destined for the Best of the Year page on the Photo Challenge tab on the website, I know, but you've ended up here on the show instead, on the Photowalk show. Kelly writes, I found Photography Daily back in about March or April, and to be totally honest with you, Neil, you were not the podcast I was looking for. To use a wonderful line from Star Wars. Ooh, as you can hear, I'm right by the water's edge. You can hear that from the bird life. There's a tree here. Now, Charlie Waite, he would be able to perfectly... and also Mally Davis. Yeah, Mally Davis will be able to do this as well. He'd be able to perfectly... Oh, look, there's a swan coming into shot as well. He'd be able to perfectly isolate this tree. And I'm not going to do it any favours. But then the swan has appeared. And he has saved, or she has saved, the day. Because you've just become another focus in the picture along with this tree. Oh, marvellous. Hold on. You've come a bit too close to me now. Not that I'm being fussy. Oh, there, look. Mum, Dad, signets. Oh, all of them together. Hold on, Kelly. I'll get back to your mail in a moment. I think they've come to me. They're thinking, hang on, have you brought some food? Where's our food? Hello, family. Family swan. Marvellous. Sorry, no food though. Let me move on so I'm not teasing you. Yes, I found Photography Daily back in March or April. And to be totally honest with you, you were not the podcast I was looking for. These are not the drones you're looking for. Please don't be offended though. I've come to love listening to the podcast. It's opened my mind to other styles of photography, other views from wedding to war to street. Now the dreaded C word. I think for me, even with all the bad that there's been, there has been some light, some positivity. For starters, I've picked up my cameras more and I just follow the light. If I do come home with 500 images of just the light falling on the trees from forest walks, well, it lifts my spirits. I've sent in 2 pictures from my walks. First one, earlier this month. So we are a couple of weeks out with your email, so that would have been December. An outing with a good friend who's had a rather rough time the last couple of months, losing his dad and his father-in-law within a few months of each other. We both needed to run away for a day of photography, and I knew he needed so much to talk. He was there for me when my mum passed. He phoned me a few weeks after and said, "Pack your camera bag, let's go." One of the best things anyone ever did for me. I tell you what, you will hear today from Charlie exactly what, that solace, that peace, that quiet that photography can bring to you. I know it's a running theme in the show, that one. Second, taken on the way to a wedding of a very special man and uncle to a very special lady who I've grown to love. I look at this, it's an intentional camera movement, ICM image, and I find the feeling of it to be something along the lines of, well, life is a blur and you never know what's about to happen. So Kelly, thank you for the pictures, fantastic, and I'll share those on the show page. Next one from Ewan McNeil. It's a picture. There's not really a lot of words. Well, there's no words. It's a picture, but I can describe it. I asked him to send this picture in, actually. And this is an inspired idea. It really is. I'll put Ewan's picture up on the show page today. If you've ever used a tripod in the wind, and we've had plenty of stories of tripods blowing over, haven't we? If you position the legs above grass or anything that you can screw something into, buy yourself a dog stake. A dog stake, Neil? What's a dog stake? I am, of course, talking about S-T-A-K-E, a steak, not the kind of steak you might find in less than reputable burger joints in some countries. A stake, the stake you put into the ground. The big the screw one, the screw formatted one, with a handle and a ring at the top to attach a lead to. If you can screw it into the grass, yeah, you know the ones. Yeah, if you're having a picnic and you want to make sure that your dog is staying with your sandwiches and not nipping next door to the other picnic table and stealing all their stuff, you attach the top of the stake. See, you screw it in, and then you attach the top of the stake to a bungee cord, and that bungee cord to a ringlet just below the head of the tripod. Problem solved. A tripod that just will not blow over. If you're still thinking, I'm not quite sure how that works, look at the show page today. Go to photographydaily.show, choose today's episode, and you'll see exactly what inspired idea Ewan had. And then in our triptych of mails, I'm still working through your photo plan mails for 2022, so if you sent one, I will get to it. Here's one from Eric with a K. Erik Jacobi Peterson from Denmark land. Photo plans for 22. Oh, you're noisy. What are they? Are they coots? Oh, Neil, come on. Your parents would turn in their grave. They would, wouldn't they? My dad, my mum would have known that straight away. Coot, son? A coot? Didn't you spend hours with us in a hide? No, I'm sure it's a coot. Look, just behind the... That's a coot, isn't it? Anyway, Eric with a K. Hi, Neil. Plans. Well, I try to avoid them at all costs. Usually, as life has shown me, no plan survives first contact with the enemy. I do have some goals, and I work towards some of those, which are akin to a plan of sorts, I suppose. I have 3. Number 1, keep shooting for me. I've done some of my best work the last 2 years due to this mantra. That and going to the photo club. For me, it's memento photo. It's gotten me to work more with photography and my images. Not only has the club given me the confidence to believe in my pictures, they also support me and give feedback. The critique is never to belittle somebody. And we try to not to tell each other rather, about the image we would have taken instead of the one we're showing. That is something that we all do as photographers, isn't it? We show a picture and say, well, I had another one. It would have been, it's the one that gets away conversation, isn't it? Again. Number 2, follow my intuition or gut feeling or whatever you will call it. Start believing that my images are better now than they were last year. That's solid advice. And number 3, shoot locally. Now, I've come out on a local photo walk today and I find myself on a side of the canal, it's a slightly more industrial part of the canal. As you can hear, you've got motorbikes in the background. Probably the odd siren cutting through here and there. And there's an estate over there, an industrial estate. But actually, this part of it, I've crossed over the canal and gone into what you might call a backwater, with all these small fishing ponds and lakes and the algae pond just down the way there. And then this lovely snaking path. I've got no idea where it leads me, but it's local and I think I should come back here more often and explore it. And that's what Eric's talking about here. Shoot locally, he says. The best images from the last 2 years are all shot locally. Places I know better and better, and I find new images every time I go back. My bench at the lake and a bus stop on the daily commute, well, that bus stop has delivered several good images over the last year. Best regards from Eric. Well, they sound like admirable plans to me, and they make a lot of sense. That shoot locally thing really, really makes sense. There's so many places that, in fact, actually, funnily enough, my wife is clearing out. You got to be careful. Don't stop moving in the house at the moment. Sam is having a clearing cupboards out time, sorting stuff. Had one of these. Look, there's so much stuff on all the counters here. Surely there's some space in the cupboards. So all my new coffee pods, they've gone into a top drawer. And while she was throwing out all the old stuff in the top drawer, you know that stuff where you say, no, one day I might need that, don't throw it away. She found an ordnance survey map of, what would it be? Is it 5 miles? 5 miles radius of where we live, which covers all these wonderful parts of the lake I wouldn't know were here had I not looked on a map. And I know you can do the same on the internet, but there's something about an ordnance survey map, isn't there? Ordnance surveys, something we have in the UK, but I know all around the world you'll have your own versions. I know that. So, well, there we go. There's some inspiration for me to get out and shoot local. Look at this map and look where the woodland is that I would not have otherwise seen before. I didn't appreciate maybe existed. Right, some inspiration. Stop talking, Neil. Okay. We talk a lot about moments on this show, decisive moments and freezing and stopping time. Here's a slightly different concept from photographer Henrik Saxgren from episode 242, talking about his time spent with local hunters, living and recording their life across many trips to Greenland. And how he just didn't simply want to stop time in his pictures, but he wanted to somehow feel like you were a time traveler in his pictures.
You know, when I was younger, I had this idea I shared with Cathy Bresson of the decisive moment, that there was something with photography and the decisive moment where you are stopping the time that was fantastic. But when I worked in Greenland, I had the opposite idea. My idea was that people, when they saw my images, they should have an idea that the scenario they saw could have been 200, 300 years ago.
Yeah.
That I was reading time into the images instead of stopping the time. So that feeling that this scenario could have been visible 200 or 300 years ago, this was my goal. That you could have experienced that 300 years ago.
Words from Henrik Saxgren. I will, of course, put links to the show where we had a longer conversation with him. Right, through this gap here, I'll come back to Henrik in a moment because there's something I meant to tell you. There's this wonderful, I'm seeing loads of stuff this week. There's this wonderful tree, lonely tree, stripped of, it's just the bark, it's in the, it's amongst the reeds actually. It's this beautiful tan brown colour. Now, I'm not sure, with an effective focal length of 35mm on my X100, whether I'm going to do this any justice. I could really do. I suppose I could go to digital zoom, which I'd have to go to a JPEG to do, but I'm going to see if I can. Can I pick this colour out for you? Shutter speed 125th, f4, ISO 160. Let's see. Maybe it's a better picture in portrait mode. I don't know. I'll pop that up as my sketchbook image, one of my sketchbook images on the show page today. Yes, Henrik Saxgren. He's a big friend. Did I mention this to you? Of Salgado. And when we recorded that interview last summer, we were deep into the Euro football competition. Turns out Salgado is quite the football analyst and tactician, and they would spend every evening during the competition texting back and forth with ideas and Salgado's thoughts on the tactics of the various managers. What do you think? Salgado, manager of insert name of big football club or international team here? Yes, I think not. Not that I'm doubting his tactician abilities, but I'm just thinking it would be a loss to the world of photography, would it not? Of course it would. Right, before my first chat with my very special guest today, Charlie Waite, let's go to the Facebook page, Robin. It's a very Batman moment. I have a post I spied which I really want to share with you. Mitek Padovic from the Facebook group. We have a glorious Facebook group. It's I hear this commented, and I'm not just saying this because it's the Facebook group that belongs to Photography Daily. We have the page, of course, which everybody can see, and then we have the private Facebook group, which you're very welcome to join, as long as you come wearing the right kind of shoes, which for photo walking cannot be trainers. Well, they could be, I suppose, depends where you are in the world. Or sneakers, sorry, let's use the word sneakers. But Mitek sent me this, or rather wrote on the Facebook page this. During the run-up to Hanukkah, the Festival of Lights, I discovered a bookshop flogging discounted titles. I've since become addicted to the place. Yes, be careful. Those places are very easy to become addicted to, aren't they? They carried a broad range of photography books in one section. Well, that is a special shop. In it, I found a book. If you're bored with your camera, read this book. And this inspired me and my partner to create what we call a prompt jar, which includes prompts from the book and our own. So let me explain this to you. What happens is that Mitek, with his partner, they fill up a screw-top jar with paper strips, all with photographic ideas, random things to shoot that day, or it could be week. In fact, the prompt jar, I suppose, what you put in it, how much stuff you put in it, and how often you go to it fits in with how often you go out on your photo sorties, I suppose, really. But I thought it may be an interesting thing of whenever you head out to, I don't know, go to work, perhaps, you happen to be carrying a camera, you could just dip your hand in the prompt jar, pull out a photographic idea. They'll all be random. You'd have spent a long time writing, I don't know, how many would you need to put in there so that you don't pick out the same one too often? 50, 60? That's an arbitrary number. Mitek continues, most recent prompts have been wait, the word wait, forget metering for light, shoot in one place, look up. There was even a dark one in here, but we're creatives. Death was one. Being photographers long before we met, we've assembled a small family of cameras and lenses with the most convenient admiration for Nikon. At times we needed to get out of our comfort zones. or just force ourselves into one box for a day. And it's, of course, led to some novel images, having this prompt jar and given us an excuse to just go out and shoot for fun. And, of course, to exercise that most important muscle, the brain. What a great idea. See what you're missing if you're not in the Facebook group? These sorts of ideas. Now, Metek sent me some audio where he picked out paper strips. It was a great little film. Thank you, Metek, so much for that. But there was the audio had some quality issues, which is a shame, really, because I'd love to have played you the moments where he was picking out 6 for us. But I tell you what, I'm going to put on the show page the prompts that he pulled from the jar. So I won't give the game away now. Go look at the show page, and maybe you could choose the prompts that Metek pulled out of that prompt jar, and you could go and shoot some and share them with us so that I can put them on the show page. That sounds like a mission, Neil. It does, doesn't it? But I think that could be quite a fun idea. Metek, thank you so much for that. What a great idea as well. And that book, what was it called again? If you're bored with your camera, read this book. Right, Charlie Waite. Where to even start? He's a legendary landscape photographer. We didn't really talk too much of this, but he started in theatre and telly for the first decade of his working life, and it's something I'd dearly love to talk with him more about at some stage when we do meet and go for the walk that we'd planned. Because originally, yes, we were planning to go on this photo walk together last week, but various things conspired against us. So we took a little Zoom time together instead, and have promised to make that walk in the coming months. I've heard Charlie talk before, and I've always been captivated, is probably the right description, by his sheer love, his sheer devotion for picture making. Thousands of people, I'd say tens of thousands of people, have, like me, seen him talk. And if you could harness inspiration as a source of power, you could probably light up Dorset for a year, the county that he lives in. Here's part 1 of Charlie Waite. A landscape image cuts across all political and national boundaries. It transcends the constraints of language and culture. You know those words because they're on the front of your website, of course. Boy, do we need to transcend at this time in our history, don't we, Charlie?
We do. Yeah. No, we certainly do.
How has this time been for you then? Because how have you personally been? Because I know you probably cut a lonely figure on the landscape when you're making pictures, but you do like to spend time with people, such as with Light and Land.
I do, yes. I think it's one of the things that I care deeply about is the landscape photography fraternity. Because it's a bit like if you own a dog and you meet somebody else with a dog, you know that you're going to get along with them. But you might well come across somebody who, I don't know, maybe has perhaps fairly blatantly different ideals and values to yourself. And you know that then probably it would be hard to find a middle ground. But when you meet a landscape photographer, you know that hand on heart, their aspirations, their great desires, their pleasures and joys and wonders that they experience when they're out photographing is precisely the same as yours. Yeah. You know, you're not going to find somebody wherever it is in some beautiful landscape saying, well, do you like this? No, I don't really like this. Oh, well, I do. You know, we all speak the same language. And I think landscape photographers have what I call photography is a sort of the new common language, isn't it? It's just a completely wonderful thing to do. In my view, to be honest, Neil, I think it's time now for photography to really be fully realized, not as I hate that expression, as an art form, or it's time for it to be seen as the camera being a most wonderful conduit to bring you so close to the natural world, so deeply close. It's just completely marvelous. So if you're feeling down, pick up a camera and walk out into the world.
You've reminded me very much of a late, great photographer and a friend to me who said, photography in my life has been the great enabler. And it's helped me bring people together too. And when I look at your work across this globe, your work, Charlie, it's been exactly that, hasn't it? And continues to be so, although travel is a bit trickier these days. But this thing you do, that we do, is a great enabler, isn't it?
Yes, it really, really is. I mean, I'd use words like contemplative, meditative, aspirational. I mean, I think a good way of describing it is when you come back from a trip, you might well be asked by your partner, wife, lover, or whoever it is, did you have a good time? And you might well have not succeeded in an image, but I would always say, yes, I had a terrific time, because it's the pursuit and it's the engagement. Yeah. And I think all of us, as a result of COVID, probably many of us, landscape photographers included, and photographers included, I think probably we're fairly dislocated, not us, but many are, from the natural world. And I think I've got closer, even closer. I mean, I'm looking at centipedes now and slugs. I'm just thinking, you're amazing. You're an amazing living being, and your life is as important to yourself as mine is to mine. And I just think that there will come a time, we're in barbarics situation now, and we're still killing each other to settle our differences. That's I know it's a bit primitive. So I'm sure that we're on the road to becoming a more united world. And I have to say that my most wonderful phrase, if you don't mind me saying this, Neil, is the Mahatma Gandhi phrase, right. Which is just too good. It's to do with animals, actually. The greatness of a nation and its moral progress can be judged by the way it treats its animals.
Absolutely.
I've got that on the back of my car. And it's so true. And I think the camera, and using it as that conduit to bind us more closely to the landscape, wow, it's just, one can get quite tearful about it.
I think that phrase was also used as you can judge a nation by how it treats its prisoners as well, wasn't it? Do you remember that? Yeah.
I don't know whether that was a Mahatma Gandhi, but yes, it's certainly true.
Yeah. I had a postcard arrive just moments before I came into the studio to talk with you, and it was a simple card from a Swiss photographer called Frank Dussault. A short personal message on the written side, but on the picture side, with one of his glorious pictures were 10 words overlaid that said, "It is okay to live a life others don't understand." And I think it's relevant, photographically, because let's talk about Lice and Land again. You spend a great amount of time teaching and mentoring others. Did you realise that was going to become as important as the time you managed to spend alone with your camera?
That's a really good question, Neil. I think being in the company of somebody who wants to explore that same territory that you have spent a lot of time in, and they kind of feel an immense draw to want to do so. I really do love that. Being in their company, but I spend a lot of time saying you have to get past the relationship between the gear stick, the brake, the accelerator and the clutch. Then you can fly, where you just don't have to think about this blessed technical thing. And I almost weep about the poor souls who have got to plow through this blessed technical side to really start motoring. And when we're all honouring it, I mean, really, I think landscape photography is a kind of a need to own that. And dealing with the disappointment, to own that experience. And the camera's just so good for doing that. And it just gives me huge pleasure to be in their company. But our words are tumbling over themselves when we're all together, in the evening, in the evening meal. Wasn't that incredible, the way that the reflection on that river was doing that? Yeah, and when I looked at that bit, that was incredible. Do you remember that sky that was going over the top of the mountain? We're all absolutely bubbling around over ourselves about the joy, and it's like a most marvelous boost to our sense of well-being.
Well, you mentioned the word honouring, and I wrote down a sentence that I heard you say, actually. I love this suggestion that landscape photography is about honouring the landscape. Let me unpick a little further, though, what you personally mean about honouring the landscape.
I think for a long time it's been, this is quite a big thing to say, because my people, the people in this world would be much more articulate about it. But when you think of just, I don't know, let's take somebody like Attenborough and Chris Packham and various others who will speak, very, very passionately about it. I think the natural world and us, I don't mean just us landscape photographers, but human beings have been traveling on different tracks. And I've got a feeling that the consequence of COVID is going to have a far greater profound consequences than we can ever imagine.
Yeah.
I mean, we have never experienced anything like this. And I think we're rethinking. I was rethinking our situation and our position on this earth. But I really do believe that our relationship with the natural world, be it through our cameras and landscape photography or naturalists or biologists, is going to benefit hugely.
Yeah.
It's not them and us. I go and feed crows every day, and they're waiting for me. And it just gives me the greatest pleasure. Other people think crows, but hold on a minute. I think that closeness is really just completely wonderful, that relationship. And we're prepared to devote ourselves to that whole business of producing the photograph. What really is fascinating is when we see the finished result, when you think Ansel Adams said 12 a year and you're doing well, when you see the finished result that could be a bit sterile and soulless, we know well enough, and you will know this, but we thought it was there. And you look at the finished result and you say, no, it doesn't awaken in me what it did at the time.
Are you hard on yourself then? It sounds like you probably are.
I think we all are. I mean, I use Ansel Adams as a measurement. A lot of people think, is passé, but actually, if you reread his books, and remember, he was a massive intellect, and he was incredibly articulate when he came to talk about what photography actually does mean. And his standards were stratospherically high.
Oh God, yeah.
And that phrase, don't photograph what it looks like, what it feels like, instead what it feels like. We know that phrase, but and that's, I think, when you hear that he was able to transform geographic reality to transcendent emotional experience. That's what he did. And when you look at some of my very distinguished colleagues, and I look at Landscape Photographer of the Year images, and I think, wow, that does absolutely transport me to a place of transcendent experience. And I think photography for a long time has been misunderstood. The worst phrase to confirm that is, you've got 36 goes, you're bound to get something. I just thought, don't say that. It's not what it's about. It's not a trial and error. You never know. It might come out. Even we used to say that. You remember? Hope it comes out.
Yeah. Oh, God, yeah. We talk a lot on this show, and you mentioned meditation a moment ago, actually, then. But we talk about the solace. We talk about the meditative process of photography. I'm glad I got it right.
Yes.
Is that what drew you to it? Is that something that you found with your experience and years behind a lens?
Well put. Thank you. Monumentally so. Absolutely monumentally so. And I know many of my distinguished chums will find themselves thinking, I just need to commune.
Yeah.
I need to go out and commune. And my camera's the supportive, I keep using the word conduit, to assist me to do that. And I just think it's just, I think many people haven't fully grasped it. I really do. And so I think in the US, there is much more credit given to photography and what it's about. It's pretty shameful. You add up the number of photographic galleries who will show landscape photographs in the UK. It's shameful. They're not enough. I think there's probably, forgive me if I haven't got this quite right, but I think there's probably not more than maybe a dozen, if that, in London. And some cities don't have any at all, and yet most US cities will have a dedicated gallery to photography.
Although there is a really interesting story about when you went across to America. This might be 10 or 15 years ago, where initially you came across a bit of a brick wall, though, talking to gallerists, didn't you?
I did. You've raised a very good point. I remember I went to look for a gallery, and I wrote to them a bit longer than that. I think it might be 20 years ago. And I went with my daughter, who was pretending to be my PA. And I had appointments with 18 different galleries in Soho and right in the heart of New York. And it was fairly daunting. I remember somebody said, you look, I bought a suit I had a suit made, and somebody said, you look like a bookie, not like a landscape photographer. Anyway, I went, and we went to most of them, and their response, by the way, they had huge images in their galleries, and many of them were inaccessible. Many of them were images that were very challenging, and they looked at my portfolio of landscapes, and I remember one who epitomized the general reaction, and it went like this: these are amazing. These are absolutely beautiful. They're just wonderful. I've never seen anything like this. It's just incredible. Pause. But we can't show you. Oh, why? Well, it's not what we show. And that was pretty much the reaction until finally I did find a gallery just at the end, and she was very complimentary. She said, "Yeah, I'd love to show you." Yeah. So she was less restrictive on the style. So it was fascinating. And beauty finds it's hard to get a look in. Landscape photography of images of beauty. We all know, when you look at landscape photography, and you look at lots of landscape photographs produced by, some wonderfully talented people in the UK. The fact that there are 1,200 photographic clubs who keep photography alive and well in our country. Well done them, all mostly voluntary. Fantastic what they do. But for some reason, the big galleries won't have anything to do with, beauty. I think if we had a lovely gallery in the middle of Oxford Street, it would do really, really well.
Absolutely.
Offering beauty.
Charlie Waite returns very soon. Here is I'm seeing pictures everywhere today. This is an inspiring day. I found somewhere local to me which I can come back and explore again and again. In fact, it's not too muddy as a walk. This could be the first place where Photowalk dog comes to, because right now, if I took him out, his size and the sheer amount of fluff, puppy fluff that he has, he would return as some sort of muddy mop, I fear. But on the floor here, it's not really the understory. This is just on the floor of the woodland where I am, at the back of all these lakes and ponds, and there's it almost looks like its own forest of small trees, like model trees. It's where the lichen has taken over, small, or just sort of grown up, small branches and twigs that are poking out of the woodland floor. Let me have a. Now, doing this justice, this is going to be tricky because this is all about scale. So really, I would like to have the ability to show you what's above us as well here. So I might need to just come back slightly. I think you'll get the idea. Shutter speed 100th, f4, ISO 640, underexposing slightly because that's my habit, as you know. And let's see if I'm going to take a portrait version of this as well, because I might need that to show the height of the other branches and twigs above them. But it does. I mean, to the naked eye right now, that looks great. It's like its own sort of mini forest within a forest. I'll pop those on the show page today. My pictures I always put them at the foot of the show page. Right, Charlie Waite is returning soon. I got distracted by that picture then, but Charlie Waite is returning soon, and the questions in the next half. In the second part of this interview today with Charlie, well, the questions aren't posed by me, they're posed by you. Those that are in our glorious Facebook group. There are also some emails as well. I could not fit every single one in the time that we had, so I've retained them. Do not fear. I will be. If you sent some in, you're thinking, hang on, my question's not answered. Don't worry. It will be. For those of you that have sent in your pictures for the 365 feature that we have on the website, thank you sincerely. It puts the daily into photography daily, that feature. It really does. And it's become, I think, more than a gallery of pictures. It's a kind of geographic roadmap to where you listen to this show. So thank you for sending those into 365, and if you'd like to take part, then I'd be delighted to hear from you. The idea of our community 365 on the website that we have, photographydaily.show, just follow the community 365 tab, was so that if you wanted to take part in a 365, but you weren't really that keen on having your own one that brings about all the stress of having to make sure that you do one every single day, which is a very laudable thing. And I love hearing from you about your 365s, please send them in, because I'd like to obviously focus on the ones that you're making this year on the show page as well. But this gives you a chance to take part in one if you were thinking, oh, I'd love to do a 365, but I'm not sure I can do it every single day. The Photowalk show, of course, it relies upon you to send your pictures in from your own walks, and the messages and the stories, which can be anything loosely to do with photography, art, and filmmaking. So keep sending in any photo stuff, any inspirational thoughts, any questions that you have that you may think will be a good talking point, and stories about what you've been making pictures of, so that we can together inspire a community of photographers across this globe. So if you're sending your pictures in, send to the email address studio@photographydaily.show. 2,000 pixels, please, on the long side. And that's the same address for sending in your 365 pictures too. Remember to send me a link to your website, or social, so that I can link back to you and others can join you on your web adventures. On the contact page on the website, to make it easier for those that want to say hi, but are not quite sure where to start. I mean, me sometimes saying, send me an email, let me know what you're up to. It's all very well, but sometimes you need somewhere to start, don't you? Where do I start, Neil? What shall I write? Any ideas? So yes, I put some questions on the contact page that can be a good place from which to start. And Camille wrote in, and his email, Camille's email, is it's creatively a checklist of things that he likes about the podcast. So you know me and my typical English stance here will now shift uncomfortably with anything overtly flattering. But Camille, thank you, it was very inventive. I liked it a lot. So let's get to know Camille a little better since he wrote in. Hello, Neil. Some words, he says, from a first-time writer from Belgium land, at the moment on a long photo walk weekend in Luxembourg land. I'm an avid podcast and audiobook listener. Rogan, the British History podcast, MMA podcasts, Tangentially Speaking, the Irish Photography podcast, Master Wildlife Filmmaking podcast, to name just a few, and of course Photography Daily. Your podcast ticks a lot of check boxes for me, like the ones you have at the start of the show. Yes, we do, don't we? When we say walking boots on, check. Film, new batteries, check, that sort of thing. So let's go through your checklist. The photo walks, check, says Camille. I take a lot of walks in my local forest. I'll link to Camille's work, because it's extraordinarily good. And he has wonderful, two Instagram accounts actually, which you can link to from the website. So go and look at his Instagrams as well. Mindfulness, he says, check. Had a rough year last year, none of it C-word related. With the walking boots and the camera, they kept me from becoming a complete hermit, because I do tend to bury myself deep in my own head. Van life, he says, sort of check. We do talk about it, actually. We're talking about van life a little bit next week. I have a van called the BBC. The blue, it's blue. Bubble, the B word, used a lot in a C-word world. Car. See, BBC. Blue bubble car. It's a car, not a van. It counts, doesn't it? Van life, you can do van life from a car. It makes me feel like a weekend van lifer, he says. It became the BBC when I heard on a podcast that a car needs a name. I converted a little van, stealth style, so I can park just about anywhere and stay the night. Food, coffee, shelter, soft bed, sleeping bag and camera. What does one need more? Garibaldi's maybe, but you can't buy them in Belgium land, can't you? I thought you could buy dead fly biscuits anywhere in the world. Anyway, photos with sound, he says. Check. Camille actually has his own nature-loving YouTube account. So when it comes to, and you know what I'm like, I like to when the point of this podcast coming out, not just answering a mailbag in the studio, and it being a photo walk, was so that you can hear the nature. There's been quite a lot of bird life today, isn't there, at times? You can't really hear me on the understory, or walking through the understory, because it's all very damp now. Of course, at certain times of the year, all you hear is crunch, crunch, crunch. But do go and look at Camille's YouTube account. My photography life, he says, started as a bird watcher, wanting to make pictures. And that kind of grew organically from a Nikon P100 to an empty bank account. Isn't that a D100? Oh yeah, he says, I only own one camera bag. Ooh. You need to improve on that. As photographers, we're supposed to have a complete cupboard load of them, aren't we? That we sort of secretly hide away. Photographers I follow, mostly YouTube land, a lot, he says. Thomas Heaton, of course, Adam Gibbs, Gavin Hardcastle, Gary Koff, Mally Davis, our Mally Davis, Henry Turner. Not yet decided who my favourite photographer is. I mean, there's Salgado. I think it's Bensei Mate, isn't it? Bensei Mate. David Yarrow. I'll come back to Bensei, actually. All the best from Camille. Well, thank you very much for your email. Very much appreciated. Well, I went to look up Bensei Mate, Bencemate, because I wasn't aware of him or his work, and I think I should have been. He's an amazing Hungarian wildlife photographer, and he pioneered this one-way glass photography technique, which is very popular among hide-based nature photographers around the world. In 2010, his image, Marvel of Ants, won the prestigious Wildlife Photographer of the Year grand title, and is described as the invisible photographer, which is very intriguing. So I wrote to him, actually. Once I'd looked through his work and thought, we should definitely talk to this photographer, I wrote to him. And I'm fingers crossed, hoping that he'll say, yeah, I'd like to be on the show. Right, some inspiration. Well, you mentioned Thomas Heaton, and we are on a landscape tip today, aren't we? So here's a little bit more from Thomas.
Well, for me, the emotion comes mostly from the amount of effort that the photographer has put into an image, because you have to suffer for your art, right? Now, I can totally understand people photography and capturing that decisive moment, and the emotion that comes with the scene unfolding, such as war photography or something like that. But for me, the emotion coming from people photography is what's happening more in front of the camera, I suppose. The emotion with landscapes, for me, certainly is what's gone on behind the camera. So, it's the hardship and the effort of getting to a place, the patience of waiting. Now, of course, you could shoot natural disasters and things, and there would be emotion there. And what's great is you can capture a landscape as it changes over time. But it's very difficult to capture a single landscape image that would evoke emotion in the viewer unless they knew the story behind the image. I have ups and downs emotionally all the time, and I look at my body of work, and what I see is that I don't have a style. Okay, you don't look at my Instagram feed and every image has the same color palette and the same subject. They vastly vary, and I do wonder a lot of that is to do with my state of mind, because I do create quite dark, somber images, and actually sometimes I really go after those images.
Thomas Heaton, and I look forward to, and I know I've said this before, having another chat with Thomas in the near future. From the price of one high street coffee per month, patrons are so precious to this show, they really are, and they maintain a future for this cast. And thank you very much to those that are supporters. We've had some new ones join us this month, and I'm very appreciative of that. And to thank you, all patrons get to hear the Extra More edition, which is a sort of a mix of personal photographic diary essays, usually photographic, but as you'll know, not always. Our book club, which is now turned into pictures on a page, and extended parts of guest interviews. And we do it every Saturday with additional pop-ups now and then, every whenever, as I say. And we meet once a month on Zoom. And, of course, now we've started to play out some thoughts that you've heard today from patrons in the inspirational links between the letters. Dan Phillips is one of our very special supporters. Hello, Dan. Here's one from him. Hello, Neil. I wanted to write to you following last Friday's episode and the topic of introversion and extroversion. I've always considered myself a bit of an introvert. as I like nothing better than spending time on my own in the outdoors. I've also a tight-knit group of friends without feeling any need to expand my circle further. Sometimes when life gets a bit hectic, with lots going on, my need to retreat for some time alone can really build, and I find myself getting very frustrated if I'm unable to find an escape, be that on a Photowalk or a solo bike ride. Oh, I know, Dan, you're going to like next week's show. Our guest. News coming up shortly. I know you will. However, it's been pointed out to me that I quite often demonstrate some quite extroverted traits. These include in my work where I'm involved in training. So quite often I find myself stood in front of a group of people who are focused on what I'm saying and looking at me for what they need to do next. Despite often feeling a bit apprehensive before a training session, once I get rolling, these situations really don't faze me. And in fact, colleagues have commented on how confident I appear while I'm delivering. I know this isn't quite the same thing, but often at weddings and wedding photography, when I'm photographing, when the speeches come along, I'm photographing those, and just prior to that, I might be talking to the father of the bride, who might be a very well-respected business person or lawyer, or somebody who's just used to talking in front of people, who's very confident at doing so as well. And he'll usually say something along the lines of, "Oh, I'm not sure I can do this." And I say, "What? But you do this all the time in XYZ circumstance." And he'll say, "Yeah, but that's very different. This is personal." So, it's those sort of situations. Dan says, "I've also had comments about me being the life and soul of the party whenever a big social event occurs, despite quite often dreading big gatherings and being more than happy with a quiet pint in the pub with a couple of mates over any huge party." It was because of this contradiction with the two parts of my personality that I did a bit of research, and I found out about two other personality types. They are ambiverts and omniverts, which sounds to me like a diet, but it isn't. And I wondered if you were aware of them. Here's some of the information that I discovered. An ambivert is really a bit of a hybrid, somewhere between an extrovert and an introvert. They're able to display both introverted and extroverted traits, adapting depending on the social situation. They show their extroverted side when the social demands of their situation require it, but don't feel the need to constantly be the center of attention like an extrovert. They can be outgoing or outspoken when needed, but can also be quiet and thoughtful listeners. Ambiverts neither avoid social situations, nor do they actively seek them out. But when they do socialize, it's often with the same or similar groups of people. Omniverts, on the other hand, can be both an introvert or an extrovert depending on how they're feeling at the time. They may be their extrovert self one day, partying with friends, and an introvert the next day or so to recharge their social battery. They need people, and they need to give their extroverted self room to shine, but they also need alone time to recharge. The omnivert's choice of company generally depends on the state of their social battery. In extrovert mode, they'll hang out with fellow extroverts, going out to parties or even throwing a party of their own. In introvert mode, though, they'll want to be alone, or they'll enjoy companionable silence with an introverted friend or two. Truth be told, he says, it seems few people are pure introverts or pure extroverts. If introversion and extroversion are at opposite ends of a social energy spectrum, most people fall somewhere in the middle. Now, you might well be thinking here, hang on, I'm trying to keep up with this, and I just can't. So at the end, there's this. One description he says I found was, suppose introversion, and this is quite good actually, is the North Pole, and extroversion is the equator. In that case, the ambivert happily exists between them, while the omnivert jets from one extreme to the other, depending on their internal weather forecast. I think he says I lean more towards being an ambivert, but I can definitely relate to the omnivert trait of needing time to recharge after being surrounded by groups of people and having to use lots of my social energy. Anyway, he says, sorry for the essay, but it's a topic really close to my heart. I think that was fascinating, actually, and I just thought I'd share my feelings, as it was reassuring to me that having a mix of introverted and extroverted traits is a bit more common than I thought. It certainly clarified things a bit. All the best from Dan. Thank you, Dan. That really, yes, I've never heard of those two types before. I'm going to study to see which one I think I am now. So, Charlie Waite. Second part. I'd put up onto, we got some emails on this as well, but I put onto the Facebook group an opportunity to ask Charlie your own questions for the second part. And I do, as I said before, have quite a few more of these to pose to Charlie. But during the Zoom call, I did get an opportunity to ask some of them. And that's what forms the second part of my conversation today on the Photowalk with the landscape giant, Charlie Waite. Let's start with Mark Neal. My question for Charlie will be about people in images. Some of your pictures feature people, some don't. How important, though, are people in your images? Do you wait for them to enter, or is it a chance if they do feature? I
think that's a jolly good question, Mark. I did a book on Venice many years ago, yes. And I found it, everybody said, oh, absolute dream job. Most incredibly photogenic country, whatever that word means. I will just leave a question mark hanging there with the word photogenic, but just extraordinarily beautiful. It was the hardest job I'd ever done in my life. The people were wrong. They were not Venetians. Oh. They were just tourists. I found it incredibly difficult. The reason I didn't really want people in the landscape is one sentence. I felt that if the viewer of the landscape, of your photograph, were to go to that place, which essentially you have transported them to, it would be wonderful if they felt they could be the first person to go there. Yeah. And it wouldn't have been pre-visited by someone else. And there is that someone else in the photograph. And I find it difficult to know what their relevance is. Photojournalism, Cartier-Bresson and many others, they have the right person. Yeah. Absolutely the right person, in the right clothing, doing the right thing. And you just look at it and just think, oh my, your powers of observation, your sense of timing, your accuracy is just so commendable. So people, for me, I find really difficult. They're not obtrusive, they just don't fit. Mally Davis, huge respect, he says, and love for Charlie's work. Mally is a fellow man of the landscape, Charlie. Do you, this could be a tricky question, do you have a favourite serendipitous moment? Yes, I do. I've got two, actually. One are some cows in a place called Lochindal, which was just given to me either by a divine power or my mother. Yeah. Who died a while back. Cows just decided to come and perform in front of me. They were paddling in a position that was completely right. And it was just completely wonderful. So they delivered to me a line of themselves, which was perfectly parallel with the foreshore, them, the water, the behind, and so there was a series of bands, and it was just too marvelous for words. The other one was an image of Cadiz, where a seagull flew at exactly the right height, and another one was in Lake Titicaca in Bolivia, where I desperately needed a little event to take place with a big panoramic, and in walked or arrived a boat with a blue sail, precisely the same blue as Lake Titicaca. Oh. Lynn Fraser, you mentioned Scotland. Lynn lives in Scotland amongst the most beautiful landscape backdrops, and I know you like spending your time there. I'd like to know, says Lynn, what is the one element that consistently draws Charlie to make an image of a scene? If there is one, I suppose. I think that's a super question. I think relationships, probably, and elements within the landscape that will mitigate the two-dimensional nature of photography and try and introduce depth, and encourages the viewer to enter and to explore, and to be delivered a sort of sense of harmonious. It's a bit like interior design, Neil, really. I always think, you walk into a room and you don't necessarily look at the details, but you just say, oh my gosh, this is absolutely marvelous. What a lovely atmosphere. And actually it's as a consequence of the married couple maybe having spent a lot of time and paid a lot of attention to where the sofa goes, where the photographs, where the decorations, the mirrors, the lighting, which complements everything. And then the viewer walks in, doesn't, as I say, look at details, but just says how lovely it is. And so they receive a marvelous sense of well-being from their position in that room.
Yeah.
And it's as a consequence, as I say, of the care, loving attention that has been spent, trying to encourage that. And it's a combination of perhaps visual appreciation. It's worth saying that I have got to know a friend, I must write to him actually, a neurosurgeon, as one does, very distinguished man called Henry Marsh. And I asked him some time ago, how long do you think it takes to appreciate or to make a favourable or an unfavourable response to a photograph? He said just about, I don't know, maybe about a second. Ooh. And I thought that was really revealing. And he said the brain and the eye are an amazing double act. When somebody's looking at one of your photographs, to your listeners, it's a really interesting thing to do. When you're showing it to them, look at their face and look at their eyes, and also listen to their breathing. It's really fascinating. And if they come back and say, that's really interesting, they don't actually like it. That word interesting is always a killer phrase.
Well, it's a bit like the word nice, isn't it? That's nice.
That's right, yeah. Awful. Yeah. I showed a photograph to my wife the other day, which I really like. And she can be very critical and constructively so sometimes. She looked at it and I was looking at her and her eyes got slightly bigger. Yeah. And she physically moved toward it. And then she said, oh, that's beautiful. And that was all within she embraced all the elements. She probably subconsciously looked at them, but came back having made an assessment of all the collective elements, making a sort of coherent whole, if you like. So to answer that question, I think that's it. There are a number of elements that you have your own personal criteria that you apply to any landscape photograph that you're going to make. I find that a very, very interesting process, and the great Adams spoke at length about that.
Well, across the pond, as they say, from Lynn, Dennis Lee in America, Charlie, absolutely gorgeous work across the board. The 6 new photography images in the gallery, stunning. So I'm a bit of a gearhead, he says, in the sense that I love to know what people use. And not only that, but the logistics of it, really. It's pretty obvious that you like to move a lot when you're working. And from your captions, I guess that you probably work both out of a vehicle and by wandering afoot. So here's the question. When wandering by foot, how much gear do you take with you? Or can you take, I suppose?
I think that's a jolly good question. I mean, the equipment's very important. A lot of people on lighter land trips say, do I need a tripod? And I think I'm going to get a lot of stick from this. I think it's pretty mandatory if you're doing landscape. And it's not about long shutter speeds. No. It's about treating your photograph as a massive production, multi-dimensional production. And it's not about, I'm glad I got my tripod because I want to do a long shutter speed and I don't want to pump up my ISO, to compensate for the fact that I don't want to, or whatever it is. So a tripod, I think, is mandatory to make you take your photograph, your production seriously. Point 1. Point 2, take lenses that have parity with the way you see. Yeah. If you want wide angle, then bring wide angle. But you tend not to want to haul something way over in the distance back to you, then don't bring long lenses. No. I often think it's jolly good to have lenses that equate to your human vision, which is sort of oval, essentially, and the parameters of your human vision. So the standard lens, whatever it is, 35 to sort of 50, 28, 50 maybe, full frame, is pretty much suits me. It really, really does, yeah.
There's another equipment question here, but it's entirely different, Charlie. It's nothing to do with cameras. It's all to do with comfort, from Anna McCarthy, who says, a practical one for Charlie. What's your ultimate fitted, thin but insulating gloves for shooting in the cold British winter landscape?
I never photograph with gloves on.
Oh, you don't? Right.
No. I've lost multiple pairs of gloves, Neil. And I've probably lost 30 to 40 pairs of gloves over the years. Oh, no, it's awful. It's shameful. But I'm a bit neglectful, and I lose a lot of things and always have. I think gloves are important, but there's something, this seems really more an emotional thing, but when you depress the shutter, a monumental thing takes place. All your preparation, all your devotion, all your understanding and your love of what you're doing and your need to own the landscape in this manner, it all comes rushing through in that moment, that one rather simple little click. But actually, that simple little click is a massive thing. And it lands on the sensor or on the film or whatever it is. You need almost to do it with your finger. You need to sort of feel that shutter release.
So it's a physical and mental connection all at the same time.
Yeah, nicely put.
Yeah.
And on my very old and yet lovely Hasselblad with a nice digital back, I have to say, everybody knows the Hasselblad sound of that shutter.
Yeah.
We all do, even non-Hasselblad owners. There is just something marvelous about it. So yes, you're right. The physical connection, very important.
I've got two more, and then I'll save the others for when I come and meet your crows. Poor Timlet. What would you say your photographic style, or how would you say your photographic style has changed across the years? Was that a conscious change? Was it inspired by any specific events or any specific photographers?
I think a lot of whatever developments have taken place within me has almost been out of my control. I'm not sure it's been conscious. I really don't. I think one of the things that possibly I've got to admit to is in the early stages and still now, multiple errors.
Yeah.
I really do think that whatever development I've experienced, be it hopefully better, are the images that I'm making now, do they convey what I feel in the great Cartier-Bresson, your head, your heart, and your eye on the same axis.
Yes.
That absolutely breathtakingly good line. And what was the other one that I liked? Recognition and pre-visualization blended together in a single moment of awareness. Ansel Adams one. I think, although you may think I'm going off the point, when I look at the results from those early days when I was working, probably the first 10 or 15 years, I found I was making mistakes, tiny ones, where there were little conflicts within the landscape that I didn't notice. And it's shameful. I just didn't notice. And we all know that landscape photography is about seeing and noticing and being super alert. And I think my eyes, my seeing process wasn't embracing all the bits of the landscape that should have been. So tighter. And I found myself responding to more architecture than I used to. I mean, that photograph of Cadiz, the serendipitous moment, it's a lovely word, isn't it? I found that gave me immense joy. It really did. Yeah. And we all know, we could be photographing a river and there'd be a little breeze, and suddenly it disrupts our seeing process and our requirements and our need. So the pre-visualization, I think that's where Ansel Adams was so fascinating, was that he needed having recognition and the pre-visualization blended together in one single moment of awareness. If he pre-made the image, you and I know this, it was all done. He'd actually done the photograph, yet physically hadn't. So it resided in his mind and his heart. And then he had this phenomenal process that he was so good at to produce a photograph that had parity, total 100% parity with his pre-visualization. And if it was 5% off, it went into the B category. We're talking about a highlight on a leaf, or whatever it was. So, I think that's just such a marvelous thing. So that it's rather like a cook. I was thinking about this the other day, that I don't cook at all, but you could easily say to a cook who's done a marvelous meal, which is a huge creative production, that was absolutely delicious. Oh, I'm so glad you liked it. Sorry, the beans weren't quite al dente. And what do you mean? It was fine. The beans were lovely. No, they didn't meet my high standards of cooking. I still make mistakes. I think probably I gave them maybe 1 to 1.5 minutes too long in the water, in the boiling water. So they're a bit soft. I wanted them to have a little bit of crispness. So I think that, and you'll know that being a broadcaster and a presenter, you'll know so well that your standards become almost so stratospherically high that you spend the rest of your life trying to reach them. And And you don't always get there. So hence, going all the way back to Ansel Adams, 12 a year and you're doing well, you want to say, well, hold on a minute. You lived and breathed Yosemite and all the big national parks. What do you mean only 12? Yeah, but the others were okay, but they didn't quite cut it.
No. They weren't the beans that I wanted.
They weren't the beans. They weren't the beans. So I think maintain your high standards. Yeah. And so I'm to answer her question a bit better. I think I am seeing more, and I'm getting more aesthetic pleasure from things that perhaps 20 years ago I may have not even noticed.
Well, I'm going to close. I do have a short question on my own, but I'm going to close with Simon Isherwood, who appears to be a bit of a fan of yours, Charlie, I would say. He says, I've watched talks given by Charlie. I have his books. I've bought prints. I think I know every interview that he's ever given on YouTube. So I feel I know everything I can about someone so important to me and my interest in landscape photography. So what to ask Charlie? I want to ask him the impossible question as it was once referred to by the great Michael Parkinson. So stand by, Charlie.
Okay, I'm holding on to the chair.
What is the one question, this is the question, what is the one question you have never been asked that you either wish you had or wonder why it's not been asked?
Gosh, I think it gives rise to other questions. So it's really the worst one is which has been your favorite photograph.
Yeah. Oh yes.
And I can't deal with that at all. For obvious reasons. Although I did participate in a program the other day which I really enjoyed doing, and it had a title that did have that question. I think I've got an answer.
Okay.
Yeah, I have. I think the question I would not be able to answer is simply this. What words can you find to express your sense of wonder and amazement at this world that you are part of? And how can you find words in the language to express that? And I can't find the words. So all I can do is stand there and gasp. Because I think when we do suddenly pause for a moment, and what do we mean by contemplative and meditative? When we actually pause and think, we are part of this absolutely extraordinary thing called human existence. And I looked at the moon yesterday and I thought, it's not just the moon. It's at precisely the right position to give us our tidal, our tides. The sun could be, I don't know, I'm not nearly good enough to be able to express it, but supposing it's 100,000 miles nearer or further away. So I know there's all sorts of difficulties in living in this world, and it's pretty bumpy ride. Yeah. But nevertheless, it is completely extraordinary. And when we stand there with our cameras, in whatever setting, Glencoe, doesn't matter where it is, the desert, I think we are, as photographers, we are going through a process of awe, and we need to own this extraordinary experience. And we don't know how else to do it. We could write, we're not very maybe good at that. We could poetry, yes, music, but these creative processes that occupy us so profoundly are absolutely immense, and we have to photograph. We have to photograph. And so that's the question I would not be able to answer because I can't express it. I can only express it. I can't find language. I can only express it through my photography.
Well, I think you've kind of answered the last question then that I was about to ask you within that answer. And you mentioned the word wonder because I'd written down here, does photography, does what you see still fill you with wonder? And I think the answer is clearly a resounding yes.
Yes, it really does. And how wonderful that we have it. Thank you to Nearfor, I'll never pronounce his name, Nieps, and Foxtel, but thank you to them for producing something that we now, somebody told me that every 24 hours, I don't know, you'll probably be able to confirm, 350 million photographs every 24 hours uploaded to Facebook and 85 million to Instagram. Wow. I call it the people's new common language. We're all photographing absolutely everything. And yet, quite what the finished results may be, that's another story, but and very pleasing in many cases. It's a wonderful thing to be engaged in, and it is the people's new common language, don't you think? I mean, we love our photography. We do.
A complete privilege talking to Charlie today. And what did I say about his enthusiasm, not just for what he shoots, but for life? Truly enjoyed my conversation, and I really look forward to doing that photo walk with him. To meeting him on his home turf, definitely in one of my favourite places in the whole widest world. I cannot wait. Wait, see what I did there? I'll get my coat. Right, play out song. Now, last week my guest was Madison Thorne, and we talked about her incredible project photographing people considered as high-risk humans, including, of course, as we learned, herself in that respect during the pandemic. And it was an incredible project to talk about. It was such a lot of fun chatting with Madison, as well as those who listened to last week's More episode at the weekend will find out, or know by now. It was an interesting part of the conversation I wasn't able to actually share during the photo walk. But Madison, actually, we had more of a conversation, and Madison has chosen this week's play-out song, following a question that I asked her for the inspirational clips that we play out between your letters. I asked a couple of extra questions, and as part of that, I asked her what music she listens to when she's working, or, what song that she would choose if she were working in a dark room.
So the beautiful part about moving to Nashville is that everyone here is a songwriter, and I've found so many incredible musicians. But if you go and find the songwriters that have been here for 20 or 30 years and you ask them who their favorite songwriter is, the name Michael Kelch comes up quite a bit. And I found out about his music summer of last year, and his album, first time I listened to it, I put it on repeat for months on end. And so I have a strong affinity for the song Belfast. And so hopefully you and your fans enjoy it as much as I do.
So you played in the great halls on many a fine bill, and after the curtain calls you'd bow. Would it have you believing you're the finest around? But you're in Belfast now. You were raised in the States and you made you a name, writing songs and playing the game. And your friends all told you that you've made it somehow. But you're in Belfast now. You're in Belfast now. You're in Belfast now. You're in Belfast now, little darling. You're in Belfast now. Don't it make you feel proud? But you're in Belfast now. Well, in Belfast the poets, they litter the streets, and the singers will leave a man crying. From White's pub to Hewitt's, they all start to weep. My hand to God, I ain't lying. You're in Belfast now. You're in Belfast now. You're in Belfast now, little darling. You're in Belfast now. Don't it make you feel proud? But you're in Belfast now. I went to Ireland to play in the pubs. I could feel all my ancestors by me. Saw the face of my father at the mouth of the shoals. Heard the voice of my grandmother call me. You're in Belfast now. You're in Belfast now. You're in Belfast now, little darling. You're in Belfast now. Don't it make you feel proud? But you're in Belfast now.
Michael Kelsch and Belfast. And with Madison Thorne's enthusiasm for Michael's music still ringing very much in my ears, I reached out to Michael to ask if I could feature more of his music, and he said yes, so expect some more in the future. And that's it for this week. My thanks to my guest, Charlie Waite, with inspirational bites also from Henrik Saxgren, Thomas Heaton, and one of our patrons, Matthew Haddow. And for those who are patrons, which you can join through the link on the website photographydaily.show, tomorrow, the diary piece that is More, where I'll also be taking a picture on a page from the recent past by James Revilius. Next week, Niels Armelinks is my guest, whose letter into last week's show prompted me to invite a deeper conversation. Aged 30, life for Niels and his young family changed dramatically with the diagnosis of stage 4 advanced bowel cancer. And given 5 years to live, Niels took up cycling, an extreme version of actually, up with the sparrows and ascending the kind of mountainous terrain that would terrify most folk. And then he rekindled his love for photography, the two playing well together, the great legacy maker, photography that is, for his children. And as he said last week, I fully appreciate how photography can allow you to find solace during times of hardship, how it can give you a sense of purpose, and how it can be a powerful tool to foster mindfulness and to take your mind off the stresses and tribulations of daily life. I recorded the interview earlier this week, and it was one of those chats that left me with a very real sense of awe for him, for his attitude, and actually for photography too, and the spirit that making pictures can bring. That's Niels on the show next week. Music on the programme as always from the incredible artlist.io, and I look forward to photographing with you, hearing from you and talking with you next time.
Photography Daily is a Loading Zone production.